Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when we must recognize that God is moving in ways we cannot always comprehend. Right now, in this very moment, God's power is at work. We may not see it with our eyes, but if we open our hearts, we can feel His presence moving through the world, through our lives, through our struggles, and through our joys. His hand is not idle. He is active, He is alive, and He is moving. In times of difficulty, when it feels like the weight of the world is too much to bear, know this: God's power is moving. When you're overwhelmed by the chaos of life, when you're facing challenges that seem insurmountable, trust in this truth: God is working in ways that go beyond our understanding. His power is greater than any obstacle. It's greater than any illness, any heartbreak, any failure, and any fear. His power can break down walls and heal wounds that we thought would never mend. Look at the stories of those who have gone before us, the great men and women of faith who found themselves in moments of weakness, yet through God's power rose up to accomplish great things. They faced trials, hardships, and battles just like you. But through it all, they experienced the mighty moving of God's hand in their lives. And that same God who was with them is with you right now. You may not always feel it, but trust that He is there. In the quiet of your heart, listen carefully. The Spirit of God is speaking, urging you to take courage, to trust Him, and to take a step of faith. It is not by our own might, not by our own wisdom, but by His power that we can overcome. The power of God is not some distant force. No, it is within reach for all who call upon His name. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't even need to know exactly where your path is leading. All you need is faith, and the power of God will lead you. When you're at a crossroads, unsure of which way to go, don't look to the world for answers. Look to God. Seek His guidance. Trust in His promises, and watch as His power moves in your life in ways that will leave you in awe. He is faithful to guide you through every storm, to sustain you when you're weary, and to uplift you when you fall. You're not alone in this. No matter what you face, the power of God is moving in your life. Let that be the truth that anchors you today and every day. Know that the same God who parted the sea, who raised the dead, who healed the sick, is at work right now in your life. The power of God is moving, and it's moving for you. Open your heart to it. Receive it. Trust in it. Because nothing is impossible when God's power is at work. There are times in life when we may feel distant from God, as if His presence is far away or His power is inactive. But let me assure you, God's power is always at work. It doesn't cease, it doesn't falter, and it doesn't rest. While we may not always see or feel it, God is moving in the background or orchestrating things in ways that only He can. The power of God is not confined to moments of triumph or visible miracles. It is constantly in motion, working for His purposes and for our good. You see, God's power is not bound by time or space. It's not limited to specific locations or certain circumstances. His power transcends everything we know. Whether in the quiet of our hearts, in the midst of our struggles, or in the bustling chaos of everyday life, God's power is moving, shaping, and transforming the world around us. Even when we're unaware, He's working behind the scenes, orchestrating events and circumstances in ways that often escape our understanding. It's a divine force that is always present, constantly holding the universe together, and intricately involved in the smallest details of our lives. Consider the times when you felt hopeless or alone, when it seemed like there was no way out of your circumstances. In those moments, you may have wondered if God was there at all. But let me tell you, even when you couldn't feel His presence, He was there, and His power was at work. It's easy to believe in God's power when things are going well, when life is smooth and the path is clear. But the true test of God's power comes in those dark moments, in the moments of uncertainty and struggle. That is when His power shines brightest. God's power is not just something that we experience in grand miracles or in times of deliverance. It is something that sustains us in the day-to-day. It is in the stillness of the night when you're feeling lost. His power is there to provide comfort. It is in the moments of doubt. His power is there to bring clarity. It is in the moments of weakness His power is there to make us strong. And often, God's greatest work is done in the hidden, quiet moments when we least expect it. It's important to remember that God's power is not something that we can control. We can't demand it or manipulate it to serve our desires, but we can trust it. We can rest in the assurance that, even when we don't understand what's happening or why it's happening, God's power is at work for our benefit. He knows what is best for us, and His power is moving in ways that will bring about the ultimate good. God's power is always at work, but we need to open our hearts to it. Sometimes we're so focused on what we want or on the problems we're facing that we miss the subtle, yet profound ways that God's power is moving in our lives. If we can shift our focus and trust in God's ability to move, we'll begin to see how He's working in ways we never imagined. God's power is alive, it is active, and it is at work in your life right now, even when you can't see it. All we have to do is have faith, believe, and know that He is always moving. There are moments in life when we feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. We may face circumstances that seem overwhelming, where the odds are stacked against us, and we question whether we can continue. Yet, in those very moments, we need to remind ourselves that no challenge, no difficulty, no obstacle is greater than God's power. His strength is greater than any mountain we face, and His ability to help us overcome is unmatched. God's power is not passive, it is active and transformative. When we face trials, it may feel like we're standing at the edge of a cliff with no way forward. But God's power is the very force that can move that mountain, calm that storm, and open a path where none seemed possible. It doesn't matter how insurmountable the problem might seem, God's power is always greater than our circumstances. We may feel weak, but His strength is perfect in our weakness. Think about the stories of those who have gone before us, the heroes of faith who faced enormous challenges. Consider Moses standing at the edge of the Red Sea with the Egyptian army behind him. He had no way of knowing how they would escape, no solution in his mind. But God's power parted the waters and they walked through on dry land. When the Israelites faced the wall of Jericho, they had no way of bringing it down. But God's power made the walls crumble. Time and again throughout Scripture, we see that when God's people faced trials too big for them to handle, His power was the difference between defeat and victory. This is the same power that is available to us today. It's easy to look at our own lives and think that our struggles are too big, too complicated, or too painful to overcome. We might believe that we're not strong enough, smart enough, or capable enough to face what's ahead. But we are never alone in our battles. God's power is with us, working on our behalf. His power doesn't just come to deliver us from our troubles, it also equips us to endure and to rise above them. When we face difficulties, it's often easy to feel defeated and give in to discouragement. But the power of God works in our hearts to transform those feelings. It's through His strength that we find the courage to continue, even when we feel like giving up. God's power is not just for the big moments of deliverance, it's in the quiet moments of perseverance, the day-to-day endurance that allows us to keep moving forward, even when we don't see the full picture. We may not always understand why we face the struggles we do. We might ask, why me? Why now? But even in those questions, God's power is at work. Sometimes His power works in ways that are unseen, helping us grow in character, in faith, and in perseverance. He is using every circumstance for a greater purpose, and His power is molding us, shaping us, and preparing us for the victories ahead. In every moment of trial, we have the opportunity to lean into God's power, to trust that His strength is greater than our fear, greater than our doubt, and greater than the challenges we face. When we embrace this truth, we can walk with confidence, knowing that we will overcome, not because of our own ability, but because God's power is greater than any obstacle that stands in our way. Faith is the key that unlocks the power of God in our lives. It is not by our own strength or understanding that we overcome life's challenges, but by the simple yet profound act of trusting in God. Faith is more than just believing in God's existence, it is trusting in His promises, His timing, and His ability to move in our lives in ways we cannot see. When we place our faith in God, we open ourselves to the incredible power that He is always ready to provide. Faith is the bridge between the unknown and the known, between our current struggles and the victories God has promised. Without faith, we may be consumed by doubt, fear, and uncertainty. But when we step out in faith, even in the smallest measure, we invite God's power to move on our behalf. It is not the size of our faith that matters. It's the direction of our faith toward God and His promises that allows His power to be made real in our lives. Jesus said that faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains. This is not about having perfect faith. It's about having faith in a perfect God. There are times in our lives when the circumstances before us make it difficult to believe that God is moving, that He is working for our good. When things seem bleak, we can struggle to keep our eyes on Him. But this is when faith becomes so essential. It is in the moments of doubt and confusion that our faith, though small, can be the key that unlocks God's miraculous power. When we trust God in the midst of our trials, His power is activated in ways we could never anticipate. Look at the story of Abraham. He was asked by God to leave everything he knew, to step into the unknown, and to trust that God would lead him to a promise that seemed impossible. Abraham's faith was tested, but it was through his trust in God's power and promises that he became the father of many nations. In his old age, when everything pointed to impossibility, God's power fulfilled His promise. Abraham didn't see how it would happen, but he trusted God to make it happen. His faith wasn't about understanding the how, but about trusting in the who. Faith also helps us endure through the tough seasons. When we face trials, when the weight of life's burden seems too much to bear, it is faith that keeps us moving forward. Faith is what allows us to trust that, even though we may not understand what is happening, God's power is still working for our good. In times of difficulty, faith can help us see beyond the present circumstances and hold on to the hope of God's promises. It's easy to have faith when everything is going well, but real faith shines brightest when life doesn't make sense. It's in those moments that God's power becomes most apparent. When we continue to trust Him, when we refuse to give in to despair, we allow His power to move us, to strengthen us, and to transform us from the inside out. It's through this kind of faith that we experience God's power in the most profound and life-changing ways. Faith opens the door to God's transformative power. It doesn't matter what we face or how impossible the situation may seem. When we trust in God, we release the power of heaven into our lives. It is faith that activates that power, and it is faith that gives us the strength to face whatever comes our way. Even in the moments of uncertainty, faith enables us to rest in the knowledge that God is at work, and His power will guide us through. God's power is not distant or detached from us. It is personal, intimate, and always available to those who seek it. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who healed the sick, and who raised the dead is the same God who is working in your life right now. His power is not something that is far off or only accessible to a select few. It is for everyone who calls upon His name. His power is not reserved for grand miracles or extraordinary moments. It is woven into the very fabric of our daily lives, available to each of us, regardless of where we are, who we are, or what we've done. When we think about God's power, we often envision it in terms of dramatic displays, earthquakes, floods, or the parting of seas. While His power can manifest in those ways, His greatest work is often done in the quiet, hidden places of our hearts. God's power is a constant companion to those who are open to it. It's in the whisper of encouragement when we feel down, the strength to keep going when we want to give up, and the peace that surpasses all understanding in the midst of chaos. His power is a force that sustains us day in and day out. We often think that God's power is only for the extraordinary moments in life, the crises or the major turning points. But God's power is present in the ordinary, mundane moments as well. It is in the routine of our daily lives that we can experience the most profound demonstrations of God's power. It is in the act of living faithfully, of choosing to trust Him when things seem uncertain, of seeking His guidance when we don't know the way, that we see His power at work in the most personal of ways. Think about the countless times you felt led to make a decision, or you've sensed God nudging you toward a particular path. That is God's power working in your heart, guiding you in the direction He knows is best. It's in those quiet moments when we don't necessarily see the full picture, but we trust God anyway, that His power works in the most profound ways. We may not always recognize it immediately, but God is always moving, always present, and always making His power available to us in every aspect of our lives. It's also important to remember that God's power works in us, not just for us. God is not a genie who simply grants our wishes or a distant force we turn to when we need something. His power is a transforming power that works within us to mold us into the people He created us to be. He is not just interested in changing our circumstances, He is concerned with changing our hearts, our minds, and our spirits. His power shapes us, refines us, and makes us more like Christ. It is in this transformation that we experience His power most fully. We don't have to be perfect or have it all together to experience God's power. It's not about our abilities or our worthiness, but about His grace and His willingness to move in our lives. All we need to do is open ourselves to Him, to trust that He is present, and to rely on His power to lead, guide, and sustain us. God's power is always available to us, and it is active in our lives whether we realize it or not. It is not distant, it is personal, always moving, and always available to those who seek it. In the midst of life's struggles, when the road ahead seems uncertain, and the burdens we carry feel too heavy to bear, God's power provides the direction and strength we need. Life doesn't always go according to plan. We face moments of confusion, doubt, and fear, and we often find ourselves standing at crossroads, unsure of which path to take. In those times, we are not left to navigate on our own. God's power is available to guide us and sustain us through every season, providing the strength we need to move forward, even when we can't see the full picture. One of the most important aspects of God's power is that it gives us direction. When we find ourselves at a crossroads, uncertain of which way to go, we can rest assured that God will provide the guidance we need. It's not always an immediate or clear answer, but if we seek His wisdom and trust in His leading, His power will show us the way. Sometimes we're so focused on what we can see that we forget God's perspective is far greater than our own. He sees the beginning from the end, and He knows what is best for us. His power moves to direct our steps, guiding us in ways that will ultimately bring us closer to His plan for our lives. God's power also strengthens us when we are weak. There are seasons in life when we feel like we have nothing left to give. We feel drained, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. In those moments, God's power is a source of renewal and strength. It's not about our own endurance, but about drawing from His infinite supply of strength. His power doesn't just help us survive, it helps us thrive. When we feel like we can't go on, His power lifts us up, carries us, and gives us the courage to keep moving forward. We are reminded that it is not in our own ability to push through, but in our reliance on God's power that we are able to endure. The strength that God provides through His power is not just for the big, dramatic moments in life, it's for the everyday challenges too. Whether it's facing a difficult conversation, persevering through a tough season at work, or dealing with personal struggles, God's power is at work in every aspect of our lives. His strength doesn't come just when we're facing life-altering decisions or monumental obstacles. It is present in the small moments, the daily challenges, the quiet struggles that no one else sees. In these moments, we can rely on God's power to give us the strength to act with grace, wisdom, and courage. Moreover, God's power is a constant presence that doesn't leave us, even when we feel like we're at our lowest. In the times when we feel abandoned, when we feel like we've been left to face life's hardships alone, God's power is still there, working in us and through us. It may not always be evident in the moment, but we can be certain that His power is working behind the scenes to bring about His good purposes. Sometimes the strength we need isn't an immediate burst of energy or a clear sign of direction, but rather the quiet assurance that God is with us, that He is guiding us, and that He is sustaining us even when we can't see the way forward. God's power not only leads us but also transforms us. In times of trial, His power refines our character, builds our faith, and shapes us into the people He has created us to be. It is through His power that we grow, learn, and become stronger in our trust in Him. Each challenge we face is an opportunity to experience more of God's strength, to witness His faithfulness, and to deepen our reliance on His power to sustain us. His power doesn't just help us make it through the hard times, it transforms us, making us more resilient, more trusting, and more aligned with His will for our lives. As we reflect on the truth that God's power is always at work in our lives, we are reminded that no matter what we face, whether it's challenges, struggles, or moments of doubt, His strength is greater than anything we could ever encounter. His power is not distant, it is personal, always available to guide, sustain, and transform us. It is through faith that we unlock the fullness of His power. And it is through our trust in Him that we are equipped to overcome. God's power is moving now, in every moment, in every circumstance, and it is always working for our good. So no matter where you are today, whether in the midst of trial, standing at a crossroads, or simply going through the routine of daily life, know this: God's power is with you, His strength is available to you, and He is moving in your life in ways you cannot always see but can always trust. Embrace His power, rely on it, and know that with God all things are possible.